this is all about efficiency for me. Um, One thing I learned from going from assistant coach to head coach 5 years ago is just having to manage time. And there's so many things that happen throughout the day that are unpredictable and that you can't really account for as far as time is concerned. So being effective and obviously efficient with the time that you do have planned out, like practice playing in this case, became super important. And my first couple of years, I was planning every practice out individually using the plan that I sent you as well, which I'll still do from time to time. But then I started doing it this way and kind of planning out the whole week. And it became a lot more efficient and accomplished a lot more for us as a staff. You'll notice on the Monday, I don't, so at least this fall, we had our staff meeting on Mondays at noon after our first practice. So I would create the Monday practice plan in the form that I sent you. And then we would meet for the rest of the week at noon after our first practice, to go over what the rest of the week would be. And we kind of use this as a template to go over what we want to do. And you'll notice too, like some of the, like for example, on Thursday, server school and microdosing is the bottom. And that was because at the time we only had one setter because of injuries. And so we wanted to make sure that and he had to leave early for class on Thursday. So we just had to restructure practice in that way. So we started 6-on-6 a little earlier. That's why that's happening. And that's why that's kind of in different order for some of those days. But just kind of starting from the top, I just kind of start with the schedule just to make sure, again, that we're all on the same page as staff and that everybody understands what's going on throughout the week and if there are any schedule changes that are outside of the weekly routine in red. And I put these, to be clear too, I'll type this up. I'll send it out to the entire staff, our strength coach, our athletic trainer, coaching staff, director of operations, and then I'll put it on the whiteboard for the entire week so the guys can look at it too if they ever want to. So if they want to see what the plan is for the week, they can. If they want to look at the schedule, they can. I very much want the guys to know that it's the open book in every way possible that we run this program, and that so that's just kind of another way for me to do that. So then I just start with the daily objective and just making sure that the aspects of practice, just kind of looking at the big picture of every practice in each week that we're, accomplishing the objective at the top. I think there's been a lot of times as a coach where I'll write a practice plan saying, we want to get better at medium pass offense, or we want to get better at quick pick. We want to get better at this or that. And then all of a sudden, as I'm going through, maybe the couple of drills will reflect that, but then we get to 6-on-6 and I maybe have forgotten to incorporate that as much as I want to. So it's just kind of a reminder of that. And then it also, as you're looking at this whole entire outline, you're seeing how it all ties together for the entire week. So I can look back and say, I always tell the guys, the inner drill, you want to be able to look back and say, I got better at least one thing, and I want to be able to look back at this weekly outline and say, hey, we got better at these things. And if we didn't, okay, how did the practice affect that? Or how can what I control, get in the way of that? Or how did it really help us get better at that one objective that we were trying to get better at? So that's kind of where that started. And this is also evolving all the time. So I started this outline 3 years ago. And each year changes slightly. Like our warm up, for example, we had Jacob Pasture, who's playing in France right now. He's on the national team each summer and kind of brought a warm up that he likes back with them, and we kind of adapted it to us, and that's why we call it USA level warm up. And it's just kind of it's a little bit of just different sections. So there's like 2 or 3 minutes of different aspects. It starts with arm warm up, your typical arm warm up. But then the guys run the whole thing. So they get to choose which aspects of it. We just kind of give them parameters of what we want, but they run the whole thing. We set some boundaries at times if we need to, but it just gives them some autonomy of how to run it and gives them the ability to kind of do the things they want to do to start practice. And then we always start practice with a competition aspects. I always think back to a camp that I did with a mentor about 10 years ago, and I was groggy. It was in the morning. I wasn't, super talkative. I wasn't feeling super energetic. And I think he noticed, and he had me do a drill that required a lot of my energy and a lot of emotion. And so I did that drill, ran it. And halfway through it, I realized I wasn't feeling blah anymore. I was very into practice. I was feeling much more engaged. So I kind of used that story as a setup for why we compete 5-10 minutes as a way to kind of have fun, get them in the right state of mind, and getting him past that point of, if they're feeling out of it or not feeling completely into it. Just giving them something fun where they can compete and get after it a little bit will hopefully get them in the right mindset leading into practice. Um, and then we will typically, again, this is kind of reordered because of the class schedules that we have this fall.
Yeah.
But the Tuesday is a pretty good example of what we'll do if there are no class conflicts, just the ideal order. We start with either we call it passage practice or we'll call it server school. So we want to do that at least once a day. And sometimes we'll mix it in between drills to make it a little more realistic, like a game. But usually, like in this case, it's passage practice. We'll get 10 minutes. I'll say like early angles or eye level. And I'll send this to, when I send this to the assistants, they know that they have to then create a drill. Like Hudson, our associate head coach, he's in charge of passing. So he'll read that and see, okay, I have 10 minutes of passage practice to work on early angles or eye level. I got to write it and create a drill that does that. So he'll run that whole entire drill as a way for me to kind of have some, autonomy in terms of what I want them to work on, but then giving him some autonomy in terms of how he wants to address it and how he wants to teach it. And then we do study table. So typically it means we're splitting guys into two groups. And it's sometimes it'll be the starters, sometimes it'll be second team, sometimes it'll be a mix of guys. We just mix guys by positions and split the team in half. And then they'll work for 10 minutes with the offensive group, 10 minutes with defense, and then they'll switch. And it's the same principle. So I'll put defense one-on-one or ISO blocking. So ISO blocking being like front one go or 31 red or gap red that you got to defend, those types of things. Again, the defensive coach will create drills accordingly to accomplish working on those things. And then Megan this fall was actually working with our liberos, working on a system setting or kind of taking whatever issues awesome. Our liberos got quite a bit better in large part because of the work that she did with them. And then we'll start to get into 6-on-6, and usually half of our practice at least will be 6-on-6. And we very rarely play just straight rally score games. If we do, there's usually some sort of variation to it to again accomplish what we want. And this fall, we actually had to get pretty creative because, we have about 6 weeks of daily practice in the fall. And the week prior to that, to starting daily practice, 2 of our 3 setters went down with wrist and hand injuries that required surgery in back-to-back days. So we had one setter for a while. So we had to get really creative with how we were going to do it. So you'll see a lot of different games, and we'll kind of get through some, like 5-All Fury, where you see I think it's on Thursday. That was one that Megan actually brought that she got from Manuel Perez, who's the head coach of the Columbus Fury. And the idea of this is it's very unique 6-on-6 game that I had never really seen before. But the idea of it, the reason why we try to do it is to try to give a huge advantage to the B side because we only had one setter. They were having an outside hitter that was playing setter. So they were at a huge disadvantage as it was. So there's a lot to it. It's very complicated drill, but essentially, if the B side wins 2 rallies in a row at all of the 5, they win the whole thing.
Yeah.
So whereas the A side has to win all 5 in a row in order to win the whole thing. And there's a lot more to it. And the B side has tennis serve, so they can miss one and then serve again. It's things like that really, again, we had to be creative in terms of how we were going to make things competitive and be able to accomplish what we wanted to, but still challenge the guys with what we had. And I also, again, I try to mix things up 6-on-6 wise, just so guys don't get bored. If they really get engaged with the 6-on-6 style drill that we do, then we'll do it more. We do have kind of our staples. Earn Not Given, where you see on Friday. That's one we wrote up about 4 years ago. I think we did it my first year. And it's one of those things as a coach where I thought it sounded good in theory. I didn't know how useful it was going to be. Basically, it's just a 6-on-6 game. You can do it in different variations, but in the research and the stats that I had, done it, at least at our level, the NCAA level, if you're earning 17 points before you're giving 8, you're going to win a lot of games at our level. And vice versa. And it's just a really good way for us, or for me, the coaches, to communicate to the guys what we need to do better. Are we playing well? Is the other team giving us points? And that's why we're winning. It gives them a clear, quick idea of, why we're successful or why we're not successful. And so we decided to do this drill as a way to lower our errors and find that balance, right? And so, again, we're just tracking. We have 2 different scoreboards. So each team is not even looking at 1 to 25. They're looking at how many points they're earning being a kill, a stuff block, or an ace, and given being a pure attack error, a service error, or ball handling error. And they'll have a scoreboard on their side of the court that shows that. And again, the goal is to earn 17 before giving in. So you're really competing only against yourself.
Yeah.
And there are other times where we'll play a rally sport game to 25 and we'll hide the earned and given from them. So I'll track it on the back of a whiteboard, just like a normal game would be. You want to be aware of it, but you don't want to see it. You don't want to look at it hyperactively like they are at times when they're aware of the earned and given. And honestly, it sounded good in theory to me as a coach, but the guys over the first couple of years that we did it really expressed how it helped them get a good feel for the balance that they need to play with, which honestly surprised me a little bit. It was not just one or two; it was a lot of guys. And then we've also had some alums over the last 5 years get into coaching, and they told us that they bring that drill to those schools, and that it's the same thing. So that's one of those 6-on-6 drills that's just been well received from the players, which is something I'm always looking for. So that's probably the number one 6-on-6 game that we use, and it's the number one 6-on-6 game that the guys feel is the most helpful anyway.
Yeah.
And then the last part is so that's all those numbers come from Catapult, which we started using about a year and a half ago. And so, and a place like Ohio State, we're incredibly lucky to have immense amount of resources. But from day one in this job, I wanted to make sure that, hey, it's great that we have these resources. I want to make sure I'm doing my job to maximize these resources and that we're putting it in action. It's, these guys wear these vests every single day. Sometimes it's uncomfortable for them. If I'm going to ask them to do it, I want to make sure that we're getting good use out of it. And so the numbers at the bottom are the team average load based on a lot of data the Catapult collects from each guy. And we have it live tracked. So the simple big principle of those numbers is it correlates with the time that I have planned for practice. So for a coach, as a coach, I always plan practices. We want to go 2 hours, we want to go 2.5, we want to go an hour and a half, whatever it might be. But I have this, so let's say it's a 2-hour practice, but we have our player load of 500 to 600. If at an hour and a half, we're at, 650, we'll cut it. Because we want to make sure that we're always, especially during season, we want to make sure that we're putting our guys in the peak physical position to be successful during game days. And so during that staff meeting I was telling you that we have every Monday, I'll ask our strength coach in sports science, say, what's the ideal player load day to day, or average player load for the team day to day to get us in the best possible position? It varies. There's no exact number. It's an estimate, obviously. But that's kind of where those numbers are geared towards. It's just giving us an idea of not just using time, but actually getting an idea of how tired these guys are, how much effort they're exerting day to day. We found that a lot of injury research, at least here in the States, has shown that regardless of sport, the first 2 weeks that you start in-season training is when 3/4 roughly of the injuries happen. And so we also use this to really monitor that and really ramp up. I think when I first started coaching, my first year as a coach, I wanted to come out of the gates and really get the guys ready and really pushing hard that first week. And, the injury, the research shows it's not good for the guys at all, just from an injury standpoint. And that's also the last time you want guys to be injured. So, so that's really these numbers really help us with that.
Yeah, for sure. No, good stuff. Let us jump to, a little bit up to you. Should we jump to the other plan? What you just mentioned that you go through that the first.
Yeah, there's a lot more detail in these. So, and just in terms of lineups for 6-on-6, there's a lot more detail in terms of how we want to run the drills. At times, there's literally timing aspects of it too, as well. And, and sometimes there's some practices where we want to be minute to minute to this. And there are some others where, hey, this drill's it's really effective and I'm willing to maybe cut one of the 6-on-6 games and to keep this going. So, this kind of helps me understand that. Again, this too has the players on the top. Orange guys are guys that are limited. They can't maybe play 6-on-6. For example, guys that are in red cross out can't play at all, can't go at all. So when I'm doing these lineups, or creating, groups for each drill or study table, it just helps me kind of get a gauge for the guys that are healthy, guys that are available, and how to split it up evenly if that's something that I wanted to do.